Hi everyone, this is Mr Neel Raithatha, also known as the Wax Whisperer. Thank you for joining me in my latest video. This is of a very interesting case that I actually performed today. It was a domiciliary visit, so I visited a patient at a care home, and they were somewhat bedbound. They had very limited body and head movement, and for that reason it just made this procedure a bit more complicated than it already was, and that's because they had this chewing gum type of earwax and dead skin that was impacted on the eardrum. As you can see, it's very deep, it's solidified and stuck on the drum, and it's a very difficult consistency of wax to remove because when you're suctioning it, you probably see already on the surface of this wax and keratin plug, it's the tip of the sucker is actually just embedding, it's imprinting itself on the wax. It's very hard to vacuum, it's very hard to get a suction grip. So I've just put loads of oil in. And what made it more difficult with the patient being, with this being a domiciliary visit and the patient's head position, was that their head was crouched down, they were not able to put their head up, and they were on an armchair as well. So the side of when I say an armchair, it had a big headrest that curled around somewhat. In other words, it just my positioning was a bit awkward. Normally, when I'm at the clinic, I've got my ENT stool, which is adjustable, and we've got an ENT couch and chair, which is also adjustable. So I can kind of get the patient in the optimal position for me to remove the wax. But in this case, I had to work for obviously obvious reasons around the patient and their head, their mobility or restricted mobility. So believe it or not, in the right ear, I was not sitting, I was kind of crouched down on the floor. My knees were on the, I was kneeling down on the floor, and I was kind of looking upwards because the patient's head not only tilted down, but it was over to the right. So I was looking from a lower trajectory upwards, which obviously made it quite difficult, especially when we were removing stuff with the eardrum. So, but we managed. The patient did really well, and I just put loads and loads of drops here. And you will see that when we eventually remove it, the patient had glue ear, so acute otitis media. Otitis media. So the term otitis is an ear infection, essentially. And you can get otitis externa or otitis media. So if you have otitis externa, externa refers to an ear infection in the outer ear. So the outer ear is essentially the ear canal and the outer membrane of the eardrum. And otitis media is an infection of the middle ear cavity, which is it's the space which should be an airfill space behind the eardrum. But in this case, the patient had fluid buildup, they had effusion behind the eardrum, and that then develops into glue ear, also known as otitis media with effusion or acute otitis media. And that all stems to the fact that the patient had a blocked eustachian tube. So behind the eardrum in the middle ear, as I just referenced, the middle ear should be air-filled, and the air pressure behind the eardrum should be in equilibrium with the atmospheric air pressure. So when the air pressure either side of the eardrum is equal, that's when the eardrum is most mobile, and that's when we hear the best. So there's a tube called the eustachian tube. It's a narrow orifice that connects the middle ear, so the cavity behind the eardrum, to the back of the nose, the nasopharynx. And the eustachian tube is typically shut during the course of the day. However, every time we yawn or chew or swallow, that eustachian tube, there's muscles either side at the back of the nose where the eustachian tube is, they contract. It causes the eustachian tube to momentarily open. And during those brief moments of the eustachian tube opening, the air pressure can equalise and any fluid behind the eardrum can drain. So that's the patient's eardrum, and I don't know if you can see, but it's got a yellow tinge behind the eardrum, and the eardrum's a bit more red and inflamed, and you'll be able to compare the difference in the patient's left ear, which you'll see in a minute. So I'm just going back in with the suction probe just to make sure I've got all the oil out, so there's no pool of oil, because could have put quite a lot of oil. So the patient, we're listening to the patient's GP, explained that they've got otitis media, and the patient's also going to be using some over-counter nasal decongestion spray in the meantime. Now, this was the patient's left ear, and in contrast to the right ear where I was having to kneel down and look upwards, on this occasion I was actually standing up and I was looking down into the left ear because, as I mentioned, the right ear was tilted over. So the right ear was facing towards the ground and the left ear towards the ceiling. So it's a different angle of attack, so to speak. And this one is a bit more tricky. Standing up was a bit more tricky, and it's just to do with the position, how I was having to stand, and but again, we just put loads of oil in. You can see it's got this. This is a bit more caramel. That's what also was a bit more difficult to remove. It was still like chewing gum, but it was a bit more stickier, I would say. So eventually I had to work around the edge. I had to peel it from the roof of the ear canal. You'll see that probably in a moment. So it's a bit harder to stay steady as I was standing up and looking down, and I was coming from a side angle as well. But again, the patient did brilliantly. And this is what we have to accommodate for. So for children, when we're treating children, they sometimes can be a bit more steady. So we have to accommodate for head movements, especially sudden head movements, because that can happen. It can happen with not only with children or elderly patients. It can happen with anyone. So it's always, that's why we train our clear wax specialists to always have a good brace with the endoscope hand, so which is normally held in the non-dominant hand. So again, I've just put loads of oil in there, just to try to change this consistency, and I've decided to go to the roof. I'm going to peel down. And in the end, it comes out in a nice singular plug, which is always good. So again, just trying to peel this around the edge, around the periphery. We've got to be careful. We don't want to touch the bony part of the ear canal, which we're on, because this is really up against the eardrum. So got to be very gentle. We're just trying to, you can see how close we are to the canal, but how steady we have to be at the same time. We don't want to touch that. Still finding it a bit difficult to peel this away, so I think this is the moment I just go to the roof, and I'm going to, as soon as I get a suction grip, we listen to the noise as well. So when you're performing earwax removal, the noise from the suction gives you a clue when you've got a good suction grip or when you haven't. Typically when you get a good suction grip, the noise becomes a bit deeper, and the suction noise kind of slows down somewhat, it gets a bit quieter. You see, we're really tugging away at this skin. To this wax coating plug, it's got an outer peripheral layer. And you can see that there, and that's attached itself to the canal, so we're having to peel this away. And the reason why I'm tugging at this is because the other end, it's actually stuck to the eardrum. This wax and skin plug is adhered to the eardrum, and that's why we put loads of oil just to lubricate it. And we're slowly coming away. I think it snaps off in half, but I've managed to detach it from the eardrum now. When you've got a skin plug like this, it's very elastic. You can see it almost wants to go back into the same position. So we peeled it away, and as soon as we let go, it springs back into place. So skin typically has a lot of kinetic energy, and it stores that energy. And once you remove it or peel it away from the canal, it always want to revert back to its original position. So I'm just trying to get a suction grip. I'm just wriggling, so you can see this keratin at the bottom, and there we are. I've just released it. I'm just going to tug this slowly out of the ear. If you are interested in the wax scope and enjoy the videos on the wax scope, because there is a big demand actually on Facebook at least, the wax scope videos are much more popular than the endoscope video. So you can either visit my Facebook page, so just search at the Hair Clinic, or my Instagram at the Hair Clinic, or Clear Wax as well, in either instance. And if you prefer watching on YouTube, there will be a link in the description where you can visit the Clear Wax YouTube channel, where I typically upload the wax scope videos, or you can just do a search yourself under YouTube Clear Wax. And I uploaded a really good video just before. It's a long, complex video. So just hovering around the canal, and you can see the eardrum here. It's more healthy looking. There's no fluid there. But I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. Take care of yourselves. Keep well. And remember, be nice and be kind.